We've been following the narrative lectionary recently, and it wanted me to talk about the vine and the branches. But we had a very good sermon. I think, Art, you did the sermon on the vine and the branches this summer, maybe? Maybe. Maybe. So I turned to the Revised Common Lectionary for guidance. So the Old Testament passage in Judges is pretty interesting. The female judge Deborah, like this is the Judges. This is like way at the beginning of the Bible. What is that, like 3,000 years ago? It's pretty cool. Female judge in charge of all of Israel. And Deborah tells Barak to go and fight King Jabin of Canaan, who had been oppressing Israel for 20 years and who had 900 chariots of iron. A pretty opposing enemy. And then the lectionary reading ends with Deborah saying, "I will draw out Sisera, the general of Jabin's army, and I will give him into your hand." But the most interesting verse comes next. Barak said to Deborah, "If you go with me, I will go. But if you do not go with me, I will not go." And she said, "I will surely go with you. Nevertheless, the road on which you are going will not lead to your glory, for the Lord will sell Sisera into the hand of a woman." And so, reading along, I haven't read the passage for a long time, so I just assumed that was Deborah. Deborah was going to be the one to whom Sisera would be sold. But it was Jael. So Jael was the wife of someone friendly to King Jabin. So I should have written it down. I should have had it read, really. So Sisera is running away from Barak, and he runs to an ally, what he thinks of his king. And he hides under a rug, and he says, "If they come by, say I'm right here." And then he falls asleep because he must have been running for a long time and he was exhausted. So he falls asleep under the rug, and Jael, and there's no kids here. I think I didn't put it in because I thought, oh, this maybe is a little bit gory for the kids, but they're not here. So Jael takes a tent spike and she hammers it into Sisera's head, assassinating him. So the passage doesn't explore why Jael killed Sisera, but it could have been she was upset that Sisera was bringing a battle into her home where her clan could be injured or killed, her clan's possessions plundered, or it could be she felt it was a good time to switch allegiances, but it's pretty bold. So I was telling Hoy about the scriptures for today, and he asked how they related to my title, "No Longer Slaves to Fear." And I said, well, Barak was afraid, refusing to go unless Deborah went too. Then he said, how does that relate to the gospel? Like he was thinking that this doesn't make sense, this juxtaposition in the lectionary. Well, and I said, well, the slave with only one talent says he was afraid. So Hoy shared with me this Buddhist story. The Buddha is meandering around paradise one morning when he stops at a lotus-filled pond. Between the lilies, he can see through the crystal clear waters the depths of hell. Hell being a mental space, not a physical one. His eyes came to rest on one sinner in particular, by the name of Kandata. Kandata was a cold-hearted criminal, but he had one good deed to his name. While walking through the forest one day, he decided not to kill a spider he was about to crush with his foot. Moved by this single act of compassion, the Buddha takes a silvery thread of a spider in paradise and lowers it down into hell. Down in hell, the myriad sinners are struggling in the pool of blood, in total darkness, save for the light glinting off the mountain of spikes, and in total silence, save for the sighs of the damned. Kandata, looking up by chance at the sky above the pool, sees the spider's thread descending towards him and grabs hold with all the might of a seasoned criminal. The climb from hell to paradise is not a short one, however, and Kandata quickly tires. Dangling from the middle of the rope, he glances downward and sees how far he has come. Realizing that he may actually escape from hell, he is overcome by joy and laughs giddily. His elation is short-lived, however, as he realizes that others have started climbing the thread behind him. Fearing that the thread will break from the weight of the others, he shouts that the spider's thread is his, and his alone. It is this moment that the thread breaks, and he and all the other sinners are cast back down into the pool of blood. The Buddha witnesses this, knowing all, but still with a slightly sad air. In the end, Kandata condemned himself by being concerned only with his own salvation and not that of others. But paradise continues on as it has, and it is nearly noontime there. Thus the Buddha continues his meanderings. So the talents of the gospel are a metaphor. Hoy argues the talents are a metaphor for compassion. The slave burying his one talent is like the criminal who is only concerned with his own salvation. When Norm Dick was here a couple weeks ago, he asked me why Hoy allowed Al to live with us. Al is a homeless guy that's been living in our basement since July. So Norm seemed generally shocked that Al was living with us for free, not paying rent nor contributing to food costs, a stranger. But this story kind of illustrates why. Hoy is truly compassionate, altruistic, caring for more than his own salvation. I'm less enlightened. I think Al's brothers and sisters should come to his aid. And I said that to Al. And his response was that his family has been estranged from religion since his mom had a conflict with a priest. So he thinks that's why they're so uncaring, so unforgiving, so cold and prickly towards him. The story of the spider thread reminds me of a story I heard at Bible camp when I was a kid. Maybe you have heard it too, but it is worth hearing again. The Warm Fuzzy Tale by Claude M. Steiner. Once upon a time, a long time ago, there lived two happy people called Tim and Maggie with their two children, John and Lucy. To understand how happy they were, you have to understand how things were in those days. You see, in those happy days, everyone was given a small fuzzy bag when born. Anytime a person reached into this bag, they were able to pull out a warm fuzzy. Warm fuzzies were very much in demand because whenever someone was given a warm fuzzy, it made them feel warm and fuzzy all over. In those days, it was very easy to get warm fuzzies. Anytime that someone felt like it, he might walk up to you and say, "I'd like to have a warm fuzzy." You would then reach into your bag and pull out a fuzzy the size of a child's hand. As soon as the fuzzy saw the light of day, it would smile and blossom into a large, shaggy, warm fuzzy. When you laid the warm fuzzy on the person's head, shoulder, or lap, it would snuggle up and melt right against their skin and make them feel good all over. People were always asking each other for warm fuzzies, and since they were always given freely, getting enough of them was never a problem. There were always plenty to go around, and so everyone was happy and felt warm and fuzzy most of the time. One day, a bad witch who made salves and potions for sick people became angry because everyone was so happy and feeling good, and no one was buying potions and salves. The witch was very clever and devised a very wicked plan. One beautiful morning, while Maggie was playing with her daughter, the witch crept up to Tim and whispered in his ear, "See here, Tim, look at all those fuzzies that Maggie is giving to Lucy. You know, if she keeps it up, she's going to run out, and there won't be any left for you." Tim was astonished. He turned to the witch and said, "Do you mean to tell me that there isn't a warm fuzzy in our bag every time we reach into it?" And the witch answered, "No, absolutely not. And once you run out, that's it. You don't have it anymore." With this, the witch flew away on a broom, laughing and cackling all the way. But Tim took it to heart and began to notice every time Maggie gave away a warm fuzzy. He got very worried because he likes Maggie's warm fuzzies very much and did not want to give them up. He certainly did not think it was right for Maggie to be spending all her warm fuzzies on the children and other people. Tim began to complain or sulk when he saw Maggie giving away warm fuzzies to someone else. And because Maggie loved him very much, she stopped giving warm fuzzies to other people as often and reserved most of them for him. The children watched this and soon began to get the idea that it was wrong to give warm fuzzies any time you were asked or felt like it. They too became very careful. They would watch their parents closely, and whenever they felt that one of their parents was giving too many fuzzies to others, they felt jealous and complained, and sometimes even had a tantrum. And even though they found a warm fuzzy every time they reached into their bag, they began to feel guilty whenever they gave them away. So they reached in less and less and became more and more stingy with them. Before the witch, people used to gather in groups of 3, 4, or 5, never caring too much who was giving warm fuzzies to whom. After the coming of the witch, people began to pair off and reserve all their warm fuzzies for each other exclusively. When people forgot to be careful and gave a warm fuzzy to just anybody, they worried because they knew that somebody would probably resent their sharing their warm fuzzies. People began to live less and less warm fuzzies and felt less warm and less fuzzy. They began to shrivel up, and occasionally people would even die from lack of warm fuzzies. People felt worse and worse, and more people went to the witch to buy potions and salves, even though they really didn't seem to work. Well, the situation was getting very serious indeed. The bad witch who had been watching all of this didn't really want people to die, since dead people couldn't buy salves and potions. So a new plan was devised. Everyone was given, free of charge, a bag that was very similar to the fuzzy bag, except that this one was cold, while the fuzzy bag was warm. Inside the witch's bag were cold pricklies. These cold pricklies did not make people feel warm and fuzzy. In fact, they made them feel cold and prickly instead. But the cold pricklies were better than nothing, and they did prevent people's backs from shriveling up. So from then on, when someone asked for a warm fuzzy, people who were worried about depleting their supply would say, "I can't give you a warm fuzzy, but would you like a cold prickly instead?" Sometimes two people would walk up to each other, thinking that maybe they could get a warm fuzzy this time, but one of them would change his mind, and they would wind up giving each other cold pricklies instead. So the end result was that people were not dying anymore, but a lot of people were very happy and feeling very cold and prickly indeed. This situation got very complicated since the coming of the witch, because there were fewer and fewer warm fuzzies around, and warm fuzzies, which used to be free as air, became extremely valuable. This caused people to do all sorts of things in order to get warm fuzzies. People who could not find a generous partner had to buy their warm fuzzies and had to work long hours to earn the money. Some people became popular and got a lot of warm fuzzies without having to give any back. These people would then sell their warm fuzzies to people who were unpopular and needed them to feel that life was worth living. Another thing which happened was that some people would take cold pricklies, which were everywhere and freely available, and coated them white and fluffy so that they almost looked like warm fuzzies. These warm fuzzies were really plastic fuzzies, and they caused additional problems. For instance, 2 or more people would get together and freely give each other plastic fuzzies. They expected to feel good, but they came away feeling bad instead. People got very confused, never realizing that their cold, prickly feelings were because they had been given a lot of plastic fuzzies. So the situation was very, very dismal, and it all started because of the coming of the witch, who made people believe that someday, when least expected, they might reach into their warm fuzzy bag and find no more. But not long ago, a young woman with big hips came to this unhappy land. She seemed not to have heard about the bad witch and was not worried about running out of warm fuzzies. She gave them out freely, even when not asked. They called her the hip woman and disapproved of her because she was giving the children the idea that they should not worry about running out of warm fuzzies. The children liked her very much because they felt good around her, and they began to follow her example, giving out warm fuzzies whenever they felt like it. This made the grown-ups very worried. To protect the children from depleting their supplies of warm fuzzies, they passed a law. The law made it a criminal offense to give out warm fuzzies in a reckless manner or without a license. Many children, however, seemed not to care, and in spite of the law, they continued to give each other warm fuzzies whenever they felt like it, and always when asked. Because they were many, many children, almost as many as grown-ups, it began to look as though they might have their way. As of now, it is hard to say what will happen. Will the grown-ups' laws stop the recklessness of the children? Are the grown-ups going to join with the hip woman and the children in taking a chance that there will always be as many warm fuzzies as needed? Will they remember the days their children were trying to bring back when the warm fuzzies were abundant because people gave them away freely? The struggle spread all over the land and is probably going right where you live. If you want to, and I hope you do, you can join by freely giving and asking for warm fuzzies and being as warm and healthy as you can. So we don't need to worry that we will run out of warm fuzzies. We are no longer slaves to fear. Over and over in the Bible, we were told, be not afraid. We are told, do not gather for yourself riches on earth. Moths and rats can destroy them. Thieves can break in and steal them. Instead, gather for yourselves riches in heaven. There moths and rats do not destroy. There thieves do not break in and steal. Your heart will be where your riches are. Your Father who is in heaven knows that you need them. Put God's kingdom first. Do what He wants you to do. Then all those things will also be given to you. Be not afraid. We are no longer slaves to fear. We are a company of love generators. Jesus says, enter into the joy of your master. Amen.
Thank you, Shelby. I think I learned that lesson. We have a big trailer full of stuff